Something is happening behind the scenes at Joyce Meyer Ministries that nobody saw coming. After 2 decades on Daystar TV, Joyce suddenly vanished from the network in 2025. The official reason was kept quiet, but leaked documents tell a different story. It involves serious allegations that go beyond money this time. Her ministry is scrambling to find new platforms while dealing with a major audience drop. Insiders say this could be the beginning of the end. The woman who built a $100 million empire now faces her darkest hour. What really happened at Daystar? Joyce Meyer came into the world as Pauline Joyce Hutcherson on June 4, 1943, in South St. Louis. It was the start of World War II, and the city felt heavy with change, but her home felt even heavier. Her father, a machinist, was drafted into the Army the very day she was born. He left almost at once, and for 3 years he was gone. From June 1943 to June 1946, when he finally walked back into the house, nothing was the same. War had carved something dark into him. He drank more, spoke less, and carried a kind of anger that filled every room. Money was already tight, and now the emotional weight grew worse. The working-class blocks around her might have looked close and steady, but inside her house there was only tension. The fear that settled in those early years stayed with her layer by layer, becoming the ground her childhood stood on. As she grew older, the damage inside her father began to spill everywhere. His drinking turned into control, and then into abuse. Joyce was around 5 when the rules started to feel strange. Soon the punishments grew harsher and the isolation began. She watched other kids play freely while she lived in a house where even small mistakes brought heavy consequences. By 1946, when she was only 3, she says the sexual abuse had already begun. It was a secret that lived in the wall. He used lies to make her feel guilty. He told her what would happen if she spoke up, and she believed him. He even targeted other girls in the neighborhood. But Joyce bore the most frequent attacks. Everything was planned carefully. Everything relied on silence. And the silence felt endless. Around her early teens, something even darker entered the picture. Her father began using pornography to control her. He forced her to watch it, to confuse her, to break her sense of self. It made her feel strange around other kids, ashamed, different. Schoolwork slipped. She stopped inviting friends home because she knew what he might do. By the time she turned 12, she believed she was worthless. Not just because of what he did, but because of what he told her every day. Every insult chipped away at her mind. Every threat sank deeper. And her mother's quiet suffering in the background only made the loneliness sharper. The guilt, the fear, and the confusion wrapped around her life like a tight rope. Her mother's silence was one of the deepest wounds. Joyce longed for someone to stand up for her. But her mother was caught in her own web of fear. She chose silence because she could not bear the shame that would come if she spoke out. Years later, she admitted it. She said she could not face the scandal. The apology came too late. It could not erase the nights Joyce felt abandoned in her own home. That silence taught her the hardest lesson of her youth. Sometimes the person you hope will protect you cannot do it. At 18 in 1961, she finally ran. She left the house with the pain still fresh and the memories still raw. She had little money and no real support. She worked as a secretary in a local insurance office, taking whatever jobs helped her survive. Even after leaving home, fear stayed close behind her. The years of abuse had carved anxiety and mistrust into her life. But the moment she stepped outside that house, she took her first breath of freedom, even if it was shaky. Her first marriage came fast. She was young and desperate for someone to treat her differently. Instead, she ended up with a man she later called a con artist. He lied. He cheated. He stole. He left her stranded twice. Once with nothing but a dime and a carton of soda bottles in California. The marriage lasted 5 painful years before ending in 1966. She went back to her parents' home, a place already stained with old memories. Soon she entered a second marriage, hoping for stability, but that too came with emotional storms. These early relationships left her wounded, bitter, and angry, unsure where to go next. By 1965, just 22 years old, She had her first child, Laura. She lived in a tiny apartment and worked full-time as a bank teller. She barely had enough money to cover basic needs. Depression crept into her life. Old trauma mixed with new responsibilities, and the weight of it pressed on her chest every day. Counseling helped in moments, but never truly reached the roots of her pain. She felt lost in her own mind, battling anger, fear, and guilt. Some days were so heavy she struggled to do simple things. Yet, in the middle of all that darkness, she slowly started reaching toward faith again. It took years, but those small steps became the beginning of her healing and the foundation of the ministry she would build in the future. Joyce Meyer was 33 in 1976 when something happened that stayed with her for the rest of her life. She was driving to work early in the morning, tired and frustrated, praying in the same way she had prayed many times before. Then something shifted. She later said she heard her name being called 3 times, clear and personal, filling her car with a presence that shook her. It startled her and thrilled her at the same time. She had been a Tion since childhood, yet she felt empty in those years, almost lost inside her own routine. That day felt different. It felt like a voice reaching straight into the places she kept quiet. She went home that night feeling almost drunk with the Spirit of God. The feeling stayed with her. It settled into her bones and changed how she prayed, how she read Scripture, and even how she understood herself. It was the moment that pushed her from being someone who believed quietly into someone who wanted direction and action. Soon after this turning point, she started small. She gathered a few coworkers during lunch breaks and opened a Bible with them. She had asked her pastor what to study first, and he pointed her toward a Thompson Chain Reference Bible. She opened it to John 1 verse 1 and began teaching from there. At first, it was only 25 or 30 people, but they kept coming back every Tuesday night, no matter if it rained or snowed. They liked how she talked about problems they faced at home and at work. She talked about her own struggles. She was honest when she was learning something difficult. The group grew so quickly that she added another study on Thursday afternoons at a friend's house. That second group ran for 5 years. People came because the lessons felt real and simple and connected to the life they were living. By the early 1980s, she and her husband had joined Life Christian Center in Fenton, Missouri. It was a small, struggling church with only about 30 people. Joyce started a women's Bible study in her home, expecting a handful of women to show up. Instead, 115 came to the first meeting. Soon, it grew to 500 every week. Pastor Rick Shelton noticed her energy and invited her to fill in on Sundays. Her testimony about surviving abuse reached people in a deep way in 1980. He ordained her as an associate pastor, which was rare for a woman during that time. She counseled people who were carrying wounds like the one she carried. She also helped lead a 15 minutes. The growth was fast. She hired staff. She brought her husband Dave on as business manager. The team worked long hours keeping up with letters, tape orders, and counseling requests. In August 1985, the ministry was legally organized, and in May 1986, it received its tax-exempt status. It was small, but the foundation was strong and personal. During these years, she released her Battlefield of the Mind radio series. That series changed everything. She talked about the kind of battles most people hid. She talked about depression, fear, traumatic memories, and the thoughts that kept people awake at night. In 1986 alone, more than 10,000 cassette tapes of that series were sold. Listeners said the tapes helped them breathe easier, sleep better, and take back control of their minds. The series eventually became one of her best-selling books. But in those early years, it was simply her voice reaching into dark places people thought they had to fight alone. Her rise was not quiet. By the mid-1980s, some local religious leaders started criticizing her for talking about prosperity. They said she made faith sound like a path to money. Newspapers in St. Louis printed stories questioning her message. They worried it could mislead people, especially those already struggling financially. As her ministry grew, the criticism grew with it. Some accused her of promoting a name it and claim it type of teaching. The debates followed her for decades. Still, she kept teaching because she believed her message helped people step out of fear. In 1993, when she was 50, she stepped into television. She launched Enjoying Everyday Life on WGN-TV and BET. It started as a 30-minute local show. Within 2 years, it reached about 1 million people each month. Her direct emotional style made viewers stop and listen. She talked about her own past in ways that made people feel they were not alone. By 1997, the show aired in 20 countries through satellite. She reenacted scenes to help viewers understand trauma. Some stations even pulled her show for a while because they felt the content was too heavy for children. She stood by it. She believed honesty brought healing. Her ministry kept expanding. In 1997, they moved into a new $20 million headquarters in Fenton, Missouri. The money came from more than $100 million in donations over time. The new campus had a production studio that allowed her to create over 300 episodes of her show every year. It became the heart of her work, sending her message across continents and languages. She kept sharing openly about her personal life. She talked about her 3 divorces and the infidelity in her second marriage. She used every mistake and every scar to help someone else feel less ashamed. Not everyone agreed with her methods, but her honesty kept attracting viewers who were facing the same pain. In 2000, she and her husband opened the St. Louis Dream Center. It covered 100 acres and became a place for people dealing with trauma, addiction, and poverty. They offered addiction recovery, food programs, after-school support, and housing for men who needed a place to rebuild their lives. The center helped more than 5,000 people every year. But with this growth came more scrutiny. By 2002, the ministry was bringing in $110 million a year. Reports surfaced about a $10 million Learjet used for ministry travel and other luxury expenses. These stories sparked debates about prosperity teaching and transparency. Joyce Meyer's writing journey began in 1986 with Tell Them I Love Them, and once she started, she never really stopped. By 2010, she had crossed the mark of 100 books, something only a few Christian authors had ever done. Her most famous book, Battlefield of the Mind, moved in a way no one expected. It sold more than 30 million copies around the world and stayed on Christian bestseller lists for more than 500 weeks, which is close to 10 years. In 2010 alone, she had 5 books sitting in the top charts at the same time. Publishers Weekly later reported that Battlefield of the Mind passed 2 million copies by 2011, and that number only kept growing. Little by little, her name became one people recognized in Christian homes everywhere, and her books shaped conversations that had been quiet before. Her book, Beauty for Ashes, came out in 2011, and it added painful new details about her father's threats to silence her. She explained how the fear of being locked away kept her quiet for years. The book was more than a testimony. It helped millions of readers understand trauma and healing in a clearer way. Many survivors said it gave them strength, and it opened space for churches to talk about abuse honestly instead of brushing it aside. The reach of her ministry spilled into large-scale aid work. In 2010, Joyce Meyer Ministries reported assets of $110.50 million after the Haiti earthquake that year killed more than 200,000 people. Her organization helped distribute $5 million worth of food, water, and medical supplies to nearly 50,000 survivors. That was only a small part of what they did. Her team built hundreds of homes in Miracle Village, giving Haitian families permanent shelter. These projects showed the size of her impact, but they also raised questions. People asked if funds were used responsibly, especially since such a large ministry needed strong financial structure. In 2009, her ministry joined the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability. After a Senate investigation into megachurch spending, the ECFA demanded strict audits and public transparency. Reports showed that more than 90% of the ministry's money went to outreach and charity work. That was their way of proving they were trying to improve. The accreditation came partly because of earlier controversies, including a $23,000 marble commode purchased with ministry money. That detail spread everywhere and became a bowl of criticism. Yet the ECFA reports also showed steps toward more careful spending along with adjustments in salaries and royalties. In 2012, the Women Arise conference in St. Louis drew nearly 20,000 women. Joyce shared her story about enduring abuse in her first marriage and spoke about how Dave, her second husband, helped her recover from years of emotional damage. The event broke silence around issues many churches avoided. Survivors spoke on panels, and counselors gave real steps for help. It was one of the first times a gathering that large opened the floor for such tough conversations. Her ministry grew beyond preaching and conferences. In 2015, she partnered with International Justice Mission to fight human trafficking. Together, they rescued more than 1,000 victims. They funded raids, provided legal help, and built safe houses. Joyce often said her past shaped her desire to protect others. Every rescue meant a child or adult finally waking up without fear. These efforts showed how much hidden pain existed around the world and how deeply her ministry wanted to confront it. By 2020, her YouTube channel passed 1 million subscribers. She shared personal stories there, including the time in her 20s when she came close to ending her life. She said trauma and depression pushed her to a breaking point until a friend intervened. Her honesty helped people who felt trapped by the same emotions. It made her one of the few Christian leaders willing to talk about mental health without shame. Between 2015 and 2020, her ministry quietly funded 100 adoptions for children who had survived abuse. They paid for legal fees, provided counseling, and supported adoptive families. Many people never heard about these stories, but each adoption meant a new beginning for a child who had been hurt. The ministry rarely promoted this program. It simply helped where help was needed. Her ministry also faced heavy criticism. In November 2003, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch released a 4-part expose showing that Joyce made $900,000 a year and Dave earned $450,000.